Commander Jake Morrison rubbed his tired eyes as he stared at the endless stream of data flowing across his monitors. It was another quiet night at Luna Base, the moon's premier communications facility. The base sat in a crater on the far side of the moon, hidden from Earth's radio noise and perfectly positioned to listen to the deeper parts of space. Jake had been running the night shift for 3 years now. Most nights were the same, monitoring satellite feeds, checking deep space telescopes, and listening to the cosmic background radiation that filled the universe. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. The scientists back on Earth depended on this data to understand what was happening in the galaxy around them. Lieutenant Amy Carter sat at the station next to him, her headphones pressed tight against her ears. She was young, maybe 25, with bright eyes that still held excitement for the job. Jake remembered being that enthusiastic once, back when he thought they might actually find something interesting out here. "Commander," Amy said suddenly, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the control room. "I'm picking up something weird on Channel 7. Jake looked up from his coffee. Define weird. Amy frowned at her screen, adjusting dials and filters. "It's not natural background noise. There's a pattern to it, like it's structured, almost like a transmission." Jake felt a small spark of interest. In his 15 years of deep space monitoring, he had never found anything that resembled intelligent communication. Put it on speaker. The sound that filled the room was unlike anything they had heard before. It was a series of tones and pulses, complex and rhythmic. There was definitely a pattern, but it was nothing like human communication systems. "Where's it coming from?" Jake asked. Amy checked her instruments. "Bearing 270 Mark 15, distance." "Oh my God, Commander, this is coming from outside our solar system." Jake's coffee mug froze halfway to his lips. "Are you sure?" "Positive. The signal is coming from the direction of the Vega system, about 25 light years away." Jake set down his mug and leaned forward. His heart was beating faster now. "How long has it been transmitting?" "The signal started about 6 minutes ago. It's still going." Jake stood up and walked to Amy's station. On her screen, he could see the visual representation of the signal waves of different frequencies creating complex patterns. It was beautiful in a way, but also terrifying. If this was really an alien transmission, everything was about to change. "Wake up Dr. Griffin," Jake said. "Tell him we need him here now." Amy nodded and reached for her phone. Dr. Paul Griffin was the base's language specialist, brought in 2 years ago when the government decided they needed someone who could analyze potential alien communications. Most people thought it was a waste of money. Jake was starting to think it might be the smartest decision the government had ever made. 20 minutes later, Dr. Griffin burst through the control room doors, his hair messy and his shirt buttoned wrong. "Where is it?" he asked breathlessly. Jake pointed to Amy's station. "We've been recording everything. It's been transmitting for almost half an hour now." Dr. Griffin sat down and put on a pair of headphones. His eyes closed as he listened, his face concentrating intensely. After a few minutes, he opened his eyes and looked at Jake with excitement. "This is definitely artificial," he said. "It's too complex to be natural, and there are repeating elements that suggest language structure. Give me a few hours, and I might be able to start breaking down the basic patterns." Jake nodded. "Send a priority message to Admiral Hayes on Earth. Tell her we have a possible first contact situation and need immediate guidance." As Amy worked on the message, Jake stared at the signal display. The implications were staggering. If this was really alien communication, it meant they were not alone in the universe. But more than that, it meant there was a civilization out there, advanced enough to broadcast signals across interstellar space. "Commander," Dr. Griffin said, looking up from his analysis, "I'm seeing something that worries me. The signal has emotional markers, patterns that suggest urgency, maybe even distress. This isn't just a greeting or a scientific transmission. I think someone is asking for help." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "Help with what?" "I know yet, but the mathematical structures embedded in the signal suggest coordinate systems and star maps. They're telling us where they are." The control room fell silent except for the continued alien transmission. Jake looked around at his team, Amy with her young face full of wonder and fear, Dr. Griffin frantically scribbling notes and calculations, and the dozen other technicians who had gathered to witness this historic moment. "Sir," Amy said quietly. "Admiral Hayes is responding. She's ordering a complete communication blackout. No one talks about this outside of cleared personnel. She's coming up from Earth personally." Jake nodded. That made sense. If this was really first contact, it would be the biggest moment in human history. The government would want to control every aspect of how it was handled. Over the next hour, Dr. Griffin worked feverishly to decode more of the signal. He identified what appeared to be numerical systems, basic mathematical concepts, and even rough star charts. But the more he learned, the more worried he became. "Jake," he said finally, "I think I'm starting to understand what they're saying. The mathematical patterns suggest large numbers, populations, maybe fleets, and the emotional markers are getting stronger. This isn't just a distress call. This is a desperate plea for help against something terrible." Jake stared at the monitor showing the signal's origin point. 25 light-years away, someone was crying out into the darkness, hoping that someone, anyone, would hear them and come to their aid. "Dr. Griffin," Jake said slowly, "how long would it take us to get there?" Dr. Griffin looked up from his notes, his face pale. "With our current technology, about 50 years? But Jake, I don't think they have 50 years. The urgency in this signal suggests they need help now." Jake turned back to the monitor, watching the alien transmission continue its desperate broadcast. Into the void. Somewhere out there, an entire civilization was fighting for survival, and Earth was their only hope. The question was, what could humanity possibly do to help? Admiral Lisa Hayes stood in the secure briefing room deep beneath the Pentagon, surrounded by the most classified files in human history. The room was filled with Earth's top military commanders, scientists, and intelligence officers. On the main screen, Dr. Griffin's translation of the alien message played over and over. "The species calls themselves the Kelani," Dr. Griffin explained to the assembled group. "They're describing systematic attacks on their colonies by something called the Zephyrian Collective. Entire planets are being stripped of resources. Populations are being enslaved or killed." General Robert Stone, head of Space Command, leaned forward. "How reliable is this translation?" 90% accurate, Dr. Griffin replied. "The mathematical and star chart data is clear. The Kelani system is under siege. They've been broadcasting this message for weeks, hoping someone with faster-than-light technology will respond." Admiral Hayes looked around the room. "The President has authorized Operation Deep Strike. We're going to respond to this distress call." Captain Don Murphy, commander of the UES Defiant, raised his hand. "Ma'am, with respect, our fastest ships would take decades to reach their system. How can we possibly help?" Admiral Hayes smiled grimly. "Captain, it's time you learned about Project Blackout." She pressed a button on her tablet, and the room's security systems activated. Additional locks engaged and jamming fields surrounded the building. What they were about to discuss was so classified that only 12 people on Earth knew the full scope. "For the past 40 years, Admiral Hayes began, humanity has been preparing for the possibility of hostile alien contact. We assumed that any species capable of interstellar travel would be far ahead of us technologically. So we focused on developing weapons and tactics that would give us an advantage despite technological inferiority." The screen changed to show technical diagrams of spacecraft unlike anything the public had ever seen. These weren't the research vessels and space stations that appeared in news broadcasts. These were weapons of war. "The UES Defiant and her sister ships are not exploration vessels," Admiral Hayes continued. "They are the most advanced military spacecraft ever built. Each ship carries enough firepower to level a continent." Captain Murphy stared at the technical specifications. "Ma'am, these ships have faster-than-light capability. How is that possible?" Dr. Susan Lee, the fleet's chief scientist, stepped forward. "We've had functional FTL drives for 8 years. The technology was classified at the highest levels. We've been conducting secret missions throughout the local stellar neighborhood, mapping systems and identifying potential threats. The room fell silent. Several officers looked shocked that such a massive secret had been kept from them. "Why the secrecy?" asked Colonel Kate Williams, head of the Marine Space Division. Admiral Hayes pulled up another set of files. "Because our military doctrine is based on total war principles. Every weapon system we've developed assumes that losing means the complete destruction of human civilization. We've weaponized everything." The screen showed videos of weapons tests that looked like scenes from nightmares. Kinetic bombardment systems that could crack planets. Viral warfare packages designed to target alien biology. Nuclear arsenals that could sterilize star systems. The Outer Colonies project wasn't just about scientific research, Dr. Lee explained. We've been establishing hidden military bases throughout local space, forward operating bases, weapons depots, and monitoring stations. If hostile aliens ever found Earth, we wanted to be ready to fight them on multiple fronts. Major Chris Taylor, who commanded the fleet's ground forces, studied the tactical reports. These weapons would be considered war crimes by any civilized standard. "That's exactly the point," Admiral Hayes replied. "Human military thinking evolved through thousands of years of warfare against other humans. We developed concepts like total war, scorched earth tactics, and mutually assured destruction. We assume our enemies will fight just as brutally as we do." She pulled up intelligence files from the secret scouting missions. "But our reconnaissance of nearby systems suggests that most spacefaring species develop along different lines. They tend to be more cooperative, more focused on resource sharing and peaceful expansion. Their military doctrines are based on honor codes and formal combat rules." Captain Murphy was beginning to understand. "They fight like knights. We fight like guerrillas." "Exactly. Take the Zephyrian collective that's attacking the colony. Our scouts observe several of their battles. They use energy shields and plasma weapons, but they fight in formation. They announce their attacks. They give enemies time to surrender. They follow predictable patterns." General Stone shook his head. "That's insane. Why would anyone fight with such restrictions?" "Because they've never had to fight for survival," Admiral Hayes answered. "These species expanded into space gradually with plenty of resources and room to grow. They never developed the kind of desperate, vicious warfare that humans perfected." Dr. Lee brought up comparative analysis charts. "Human military doctrine is based on the assumption that every conflict is an existential threat. We develop strategies for fighting enemies with superior technology, superior numbers, and superior resources. We learned how to win wars we should lose." The room was quiet as everyone absorbed this information. They were looking at 40 years of secret military development, weapons that could destroy civilizations, and tactics that would horrify peaceful species. "The Zephyrians have been expanding their empire for centuries," Admiral Hayes continued. "They've never faced real resistance because no one fights the way humans do. They're about to learn why Earth's military planners assume every war is a war of extinction." Captain Murphy looked at the fleet specifications again. "How many ships do we have?" 12 fully armed vessels, each carrying a crew of 200, plus support craft, marine landing forces, and enough firepower to take on fleets 10 times our size." Colonel Williams studied the tactical doctrine files. "Admiral, these strategies, they're not just about winning battles. They're about breaking the enemy's will to fight." "Correct. We don't just defeat enemies, we convince them that fighting humans is suicide. Psychological warfare, deception, asymmetric tactics, none of these concepts exist in galactic military thinking." Major Taylor looked up from his briefing materials. "When do we leave?" Admiral Hayes smiled. "Fleet launches in 72 hours. You'll arrive in the Kelani system in 6 days. The Zephyrians are expecting to face another peaceful species following galactic warfare conventions." She paused and looked around the room at the faces of Earth's most elite military officers. "They have no idea what's coming. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kelani system. Captain Dan Murphy stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, watching the tactical display update with incoming sensor data. What he saw made his blood run cold. My God, Lieutenant Ben Rodriguez whispered from his position at the sensor station. There must be over 300 Zephyrian ships in the system. The main screen showed the Kelani homeworld surrounded by a massive enemy fleet. Zephyrian vessels were arranged in perfect formations, their hulls gleaming silver in the light of the system's star. Some ships were enormous, the size of city blocks, while others were smaller and faster. But all of them carried the same distinctive energy signatures that marked them as weapons of war. "Captain," reported Chief Petty Officer Maria Santos from Communications, "I'm detecting multiple battles in progress." "The Zephyrians are attacking 3 different planets simultaneously," Murphy nodded grimly. "Begin stealth protocols. I want us invisible until we know exactly what we're dealing with." The human ships activated their advanced cloaking systems, technology that had been developed specifically for reconnaissance missions. Unlike the Zephyrian vessels, which seemed to announce their presence with bright energy signatures, the human fleet simply vanished from all sensors. "Rodriguez, launch the stealth probes. I want detailed scans of their ship designs, weapon systems, and tactical patterns." Over the next 6 hours, the human fleet observed the Zephyrian attack methods. What they saw was both impressive and puzzling. The alien ships were clearly advanced with powerful energy shields and devastating plasma weapons. But their tactics were strangely limited. "Captain," Colonel Kate Williams said, studying the tactical data, "they're fighting like it's some kind of formal duel. Look at this." The main screen showed a replay of a recent battle. The Zephyrian ships approached the Kelani defenders in neat formations. They broadcast warning messages before attacking. They gave the defenders time to respond and position their ships. When the battle began, both sides exchanged fire in organized patterns, like ancient naval battles. "They're not using surprise attacks," Lieutenant Rodriguez observed. "They're not trying to outflank the defenders, they're just lining up and shooting at each other." Murphy frowned. "What about their weapons? How effective are they?" Powerful," Colonel Williams replied, "but predictable. Energy-based plasma cannons, particle beams, some kind of fusion missiles. All very advanced, but they announce their firing solutions. The weapons charge up before firing, giving targets time to adjust shields or move. And their defenses? Energy. Shields that can absorb tremendous amounts of damage. But they seem to have one major weakness. They only protect against energy weapons. I don't think they've ever faced kinetic attacks." Murphy studied the data with growing amazement. The Zephyrians were clearly a powerful military force, but they fought according to rules that seemed designed to give their enemies a fair chance. It was unlike any military doctrine he had ever encountered. "Captain," Chief Santos called out, "I'm receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It's the Kelani. Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was clearly non-human, but Dr. Griffin's translation programs had been uploaded to the fleet computers. The words appeared on screen as the alien spoke. "Unknown vessels, this is Ambassador Thelanara of the Kelani Republic. We detected your arrival at the system edge. Please identify yourselves." Murphy looked at his crew. This was it, humanities. "First direct contact with alien intelligence. Open a channel." "This is Captain Dan Murphy of the Earth vessel used Defiant. We received your distress signal and have come to assist you." There was a long pause. When the Kelani ambassador spoke again, there was clear emotion in the alien voice. You actually came. We sent that message to hundreds of star systems. You are the first to respond." "We're here to help," Murphy said. "But we need to understand what we're facing. Can you tell us about the Zephyrian Collective?" "They are an ancient empire that has been expanding for over 1,000 years. They conquer systems by overwhelming force, but they follow the Galactic war codes. They give us time to evacuate non-combatants. They announce their attacks. They offer terms of surrender." Colonel Williams looked puzzled. War codes? All spacefaring civilizations follow the same basic principles of warfare, Ambassador Thelanara explained. Honor in battle, protection of non-combatants, formal declarations of war, and structured combat engagements. The Zephyrians may be conquerors, but they are not without honor. Murphy and his officers exchanged glances. The concept of honorable warfare was foreign to human military thinking. Ambassador, Murphy said carefully, how many ships do the Zephyrians have in your system? Over 300 battle cruisers plus support vessels. They outnumber our remaining fleet by more than 50 to 1. And how many ships did you send to help us? Murphy looked at his tactical display, showing the 12 human vessels. We have 12 ships. The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Finally, Ambassador Thelanara spoke again. 12 ships? Captain Murphy, I appreciate your willingness to help, but 12 ships cannot possibly stand against the Zephyrian fleet. You should retreat while you still can. Ambassador, we didn't come here to retreat, we came here to help you win. But how? The Zephyrians have overwhelming numerical superiority. Even if your ships are more advanced than ours, you cannot overcome such odds through honorable combat. Lieutenant Rodriguez looked at Captain Murphy with a slight smile. Honorable combat? Murphy nodded. Ambassador Thelanara, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Humans don't fight honorable combat. We fight to win. I don't understand. Colonel Williams stepped forward. Ambassador, in human warfare, there are no rules except victory. We use deception, surprise attacks, psychological warfare, and any other tactic that gives us an advantage. Honor is something we show after the battle is over. The alien ambassador seemed confused. But that's not how warfare works. All civilized species follow the Galactic war codes. To fight without honor is to be no better than animals. Murphy looked around his bridge at his crew. Each face showed the same grim determination. They were about to introduce the galaxy to a very different kind of warfare. Ambassador, Murphy said, you're about to learn why humans have survived. Every war we've ever fought, we're not civilized. We're effective. I still don't understand. You will, Murphy replied. Rodriguez began tactical analysis of the Zephyrian fleet. Look for weaknesses, command structures, and supply lines. Williams, prepare your Marines for unconventional warfare. Santos, monitor all Zephyrian communications. As his crew began their preparations, Murphy stared at the enemy fleet through his viewscreen. 300 ships following predictable patterns, broadcasting their intentions, fighting according to ancient codes of honor that they had no idea what was about to hit them. Captain Dan Murphy stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, watching the final preparations for humanity's first interstellar battle. The Zephyrian fleet hung in space like a cloud of silver daggers, their formations perfect and their energy signatures bright against the darkness. All ships report ready, Captain, Lieutenant Ben Rodriguez announced from his station. Murphy nodded. Begin Operation Trojan Horse. All ships, execute Maneuver Alpha. The human fleet suddenly decloaked, appearing in a tight formation directly between the Zephyrian forces and the Kalani homeworld. To any observer, it looked like a desperate last stand, 12 small ships facing an enemy fleet 25 times their size, Admiral Kexmore, commanding the Zephyrian fleet from his massive flagship, received the report with amusement. These newcomers were very brave or very stupid. He opened the communication channel to the human vessels. Unknown ships? This is Admiral Kexmore of the Zephyrian Collective. You are interfering with a legitimate military operation. Withdraw. Immediately or face destruction. Murphy's reply was broadcast on all frequencies. This is Captain Murphy of the Earth Defense Force. We are here to protect the Kalani people. If you want to continue your attack, you'll have to go through us. Admiral Kexmore laughed. The humans sounded confident, but 12 ships could not possibly stand against his fleet. He decided to give them one chance to surrender with honor. Captain Murphy, I admire your courage, but you are badly outnumbered. I offer you the terms of honorable surrender. Your crews will be treated well, and your ships will be returned to your home system. We appreciate the offer, Murphy replied, but we'll have to decline. Then you choose to die with honor. Very well. All ships, prepare for battle formation. We attack in 10 minutes. As the Zephyrian fleet began moving into their traditional attack formation, Murphy turned to his crew. Phase 1 complete. They think we're going to fight them ship to ship. Colonel Kate Williams smiled grimly from her position at the tactical station. They have no idea what's coming. While the main human fleet held position in front of the Zephyrian forces, Lieutenant Sam Carter was piloting a small stealth ship through the asteroid belt at the edge of the system. Her ship was invisible to Zephyrian sensors, and she was carrying a very special cargo. Deployment complete, Carter reported over the secure channel. All packages are in position. The packages were kinetic kill vehicles, chunks of dense metal accelerated to incredible speeds by magnetic launchers. They were now drifting through space on intercept courses with the Zephyrian command ships. The aliens had no idea that death was silently approaching them. Excellent work, Carter, Murphy replied. Return to base. Phase 2 begins in 3 minutes. Admiral Kexmore watched with satisfaction as his fleet moved into perfect battle formation. The humans had positioned themselves admirably, but they were still hopelessly outnumbered. He would destroy them quickly and continue with the conquest of the Kelani system. All ships charge main weapons. Target the human vessels. Fire on my command. The Zephyrian ships began powering up their plasma cannons, their energy signatures growing brighter as they prepared to fire. It was an impressive display of military might, and it followed all the traditional rules of galactic warfare. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, the human ships are moving. They're breaking formation, Admiral Kexmore frowned. Instead of maintaining their defensive position, the human ships were scattering in all directions. Some were diving toward the planet, others were climbing above the orbital plane, and a few were actually moving toward the Zephyrian fleet. What are they doing? He asked. Unknown, Admiral. Their movement patterns don't match any known tactical doctrine. At that moment, the kinetic kill vehicle struck. The first impact hit Admiral Kexmore's flagship directly in the command section. There was no warning, no energy signature, no time to raise shields. 1 second, the bridge was functioning normally. The next second, it was a twisted wreck of metal and debris. More impacts followed in rapid succession. The kinetic projectiles, moving at a significant fraction of light speed, punched through energy shields as if they didn't exist. Zephyrian ships that had seemed invincible moments before were suddenly crippled or destroyed. What's happening? Admiral Kexmore shouted from the emergency bridge of his damaged flagship. What kind of weapons are these? His tactical officer's voice was filled with panic. Admiral, we're being hit by solid projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. Our shields are useless against them. Impossible. No civilized species uses kinetic weapons in space combat. As the Zephyrian fleet reeled from the surprise attack, the human ships began their real assault. They didn't move in formation. They didn't announce their attacks. They simply appeared where the enemy least expected them and opened fire with weapons the aliens had never seen before. Sergeant Alex Johnson led a boarding party onto a damaged Zephyrian cruiser. The aliens had never experienced close quarters combat in space battles. Their security teams were trained for honor duels, not the savage efficiency of human marine tactics. Flashbang out? Johnson shouted, tossing a stun grenade into the alien corridor. The Zephyrian defenders, who had been advancing in neat formation with their energy weapons raised, were suddenly blinded and deafened. Before they could recover, the human marines were among them, using tactics that seemed impossibly brutal to the aliens. Surrender and you won't be harmed, Johnson called out in the alien language, his translation device making his words understandable. The surviving Zephyrians looked at the humans with something approaching terror. These newcomers didn't fight like any enemy they had ever faced. They used deception, surprise, and weapons that ignored all the accepted rules of warfare. Meanwhile, Dr. Susan Lee was implementing another aspect of human military doctrine that the galaxy had never seen: information warfare. From her position aboard the UES Defiant, she had hacked into the Zephyrian communication networks. "All Zephyrian vessels, this is your new commanding officer." She broadcast on their command frequency, using a voice synthesizer to sound like a Zephyrian admiral. "Retreat to position Delta 7 immediately. Human reinforcements are arriving." The false orders, combined with the chaos of the kinetic bombardment, threw the Zephyrian fleet into confusion. Ships began moving in different directions, some following the false orders while others tried to maintain formation. "Admiral," Captain Murphy broadcast to the crippled Zephyrian flagship, "this is what human warfare looks like. We don't fight for honor, we fight to win." Admiral Kexmore stared at his tactical display in shock. In less than 10 minutes, his organized fleet had been reduced to chaos. Ships were damaged or destroyed by invisible weapons. His communications were compromised. Enemy soldiers were aboard his vessels using tactics that seemed designed to terrorize rather than simply defeat. "How?" he whispered. "Because we've been fighting wars for thousands of years," Murphy replied, somehow having intercepted the admiral's private channel. "We learned that the only rule in war is that there are no rules. You fight with honor. We fight with everything we have." The battle was effectively over. The Zephyrian fleet, which had conquered dozens of star systems through overwhelming force and traditional tactics, had been broken by 12 human ships using methods they had never encountered. "All Zephyrian vessels," Murphy broadcast on all frequencies, "you have exactly 1 hour to withdraw from this system. If you're still here when the timer runs out, we'll show you what our heavy weapons can do." The surviving Zephyrian ships began retreating immediately, their perfect formations replaced by panicked flight. They had learned that humans didn't just fight to win battles, they fought to break their enemies' will to fight. The galaxy was about to learn a very hard lesson about what happened when you went to war with humanity. Fleet Admiral Kexter received the emergency transmission while reviewing conquest plans in his private chamber aboard the massive dreadnought. "Eternal glory," the message was from his nephew, Admiral Kexmore, and the words made no sense. "Defeated by 12 ships using dishonorable tactics. Request immediate reinforcements. Unknown species called humans. They fight like demons." Kexter read the message 3 times before summoning his staff. In over 500 years of military service, he had never seen the Zephyrian fleet retreat from any battle. The collective had built their empire on the principle that overwhelming force and honorable combat could defeat any enemy. "Gather the second battle fleet," he ordered his subordinates. "We're going to the Kelani system. And send word to the 3rd and 4th fleets as well. If these humans want a real war, we'll give them one." Within days, over 1,500 Zephyrian warships were moving toward the Kelani system. It was the largest military force the collective had ever assembled. Whatever tricks these humans had used against Admiral Kexmore, they would not work against such overwhelming numbers. Captain Don Murphy watched the approaching armada through the long range sensors of the UES Defiant. The tactical display showed a wall of red dots stretching across space, more enemy ships than he had ever imagined in one place. 1,500 ships, Lieutenant Ben Rodriguez reported, his voice tight with tension. "Captain, that's more than 100 times our number. Time to intercept?" Murphy asked. 6 hours at their current speed. Murphy looked around his bridge crew. These were some of the best military minds Earth had produced, but they were facing impossible odds. Even human tactics had limits. "Send a priority message to Earth," Murphy ordered. "Request permission to deploy Project Damocles." Chief Petty Officer Maria Santos looked up from her communications station. "Captain, are you sure? The political implications... Santos, in 6 hours we're going to be facing the largest space fleet in galactic history. Normal weapons won't be enough. Project Damocles was humanity's most classified and most terrible secret. It was the ultimate expression of human military philosophy, a weapon designed not just to win battles, but to make enemies so terrified of fighting humans that they would never challenge. Earth again, Admiral Lisa Hayes received Murphy's request while sitting in the emergency session of the United Nations Security Council. The world's leaders had been following the battle in the Kelani system with a mixture of pride and terror. Humanity had won its first interstellar battle, but now faced consequences they had not anticipated. Admiral Hayes, the Secretary General, said, "What exactly is Project Damocles?" Admiral Hayes looked around the room at the faces of world leaders. What she was about to tell them would change everything. Project Damocles is a relativistic kinetic bombardment system. We take asteroids, accelerate them to 90% of light speed, and use them as weapons. A single projectile has enough energy to crack a planet's crust. The room fell silent. Finally, the President of the United States spoke. "How many of these weapons do we have?" 50 projectiles positioned throughout local space, each one targeted at different strategic locations. "Admiral," the Secretary General said slowly, "are you saying we have the ability to destroy planets?" "Yes, sir." The weapons were designed as a last resort against hostile alien invasion. If Earth was ever threatened with extinction, we could take our enemies with us. The Chinese representative leaned forward. "And Captain Murphy wants to use these weapons against the Zephyrian fleet?" Admiral Hayes nodded. "Not against their ships, against uninhabited targets in their territory. A demonstration of power designed to end the war before it escalates further." The debate that followed was intense. Some leaders argued that using such weapons would make humanity the monsters of the galaxy. Others pointed out that facing 1,500 enemy ships with conventional weapons was suicide. In the end, the vote was unanimous. Captain Murphy received his authorization. Fleet Admiral Kexler stood on the command bridge of his flagship, watching the human vessels on his tactical display. 12 small ships were maintaining position near the Kelani homeworld, apparently waiting for his arrival. Their behavior puzzled him. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "the humans are broadcasting on all frequencies." "Put them through," Captain Murphy's voice filled the bridge. "Fleet Admiral Kexler, this is Captain Murphy of the Earth Defense Force. You have one opportunity to withdraw your forces from this system." Kexler activated his reply channel. "Captain Murphy, I am impressed by your victory over my nephew's fleet. But you now face 1,500 ships. Surrender, and I will grant you and your crews honorable deaths." "Admiral, you don't understand what you're dealing with. Humans don't just fight to win battles. When threatened with extinction, we fight. To destroy entire civilizations, impossible. No species would commit such atrocities. Admiral, humanity has been preparing for interstellar war for 40 years. We assumed any alien species we met would be hostile. We built weapons designed to fight enemies we couldn't defeat through conventional means." Kexler felt a chill of uncertainty. The humans sounded far too confident for a force facing impossible odds. "You're bluffing," he said. "Admiral, look at the star charts you received with this transmission. We've marked the location of your military base in the Zarian system. It's uninhabited except for your facilities. In 30 seconds, you'll see what human weapons can really do." Kexler quickly pulled up the star charts. The Zarian system was 12 light-years away, home to the Collective's largest military shipyard. How could the humans possibly threaten it from here? 29 seconds later, his communications officer received an automated message from the Zarian system. The base's long-range sensors had detected an incoming object moving at relativistic speeds. 15 seconds after that, the Zarian military base ceased to exist. The kinetic projectile struck with the force of a nuclear arsenal. The massive shipyard, capable of building 100 warships simultaneously, was vaporized in seconds. The asteroid the base was built on was cracked in half, its molten core exposed to space. Kexler stared at the sensor data in horror. An entire military installation, defended by energy shields and defensive platforms, had been destroyed by a single projectile. No weapon in the galaxy had that kind of power. "Captain Murphy," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "what kind of monsters are you?" "We're the species that survived 10,000 years of warfare against ourselves," Murphy replied. "Admiral, you have 1 hour to begin withdrawing all Zephyrian forces from Kelani space. If you're still here when the timer expires, we'll demonstrate what happens to occupied planets. The threat was clear and terrifying. If humans could destroy a military base from 12 light-years away, they could certainly target inhabited worlds. The implications were staggering. You would commit genocide? Kexler asked. Admiral, human military doctrine is based on a simple principle. We prepare for war so thoroughly that our enemies choose peace instead. We don't want to destroy your civilization, but if you force us to choose between your people and ours, we'll choose ours every time. Kexler looked at his tactical display, showing 1,500 ships under his command. It was the most powerful fleet in galactic history. But what good were ships against an enemy that could destroy planets from across interstellar space? For the first time in Zephyrian history, their military faced an enemy that fought with the assumption that losing meant extinction. The humans weren't just defending the colony system, they were demonstrating that challenging Earth meant facing weapons that could end civilizations. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity didn't just fight wars. They fought to make their enemies never want to fight again. Fleet Admiral Kexler stood in silence on his command bridge, staring at the readings from the destroyed Zarian base. His tactical officers waited for orders, but for the first time in his 500-year military career, he had no idea what to do. The humans had just demonstrated a weapon that could destroy military installations from across interstellar space. More terrifying than the weapon itself was the casual way they had used it. No warnings, no negotiations, no mercy. They had simply erased one of the collective's most important bases to make a point. "Admiral," his communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving withdrawal orders from all ships in the fleet." Kexler looked at his tactical display. Ship after ship was showing status changes from ready for battle to requesting permission to withdraw. His captains, veterans of dozens of campaigns, were asking to retreat without firing a shot. "Admiral," Captain Vexahan called from the heavy cruiser Crimson Blade, "my crew is refusing to engage. They say fighting these humans is suicide." Similar reports came from across the fleet. The Zephyrian military, which had conquered star systems through disciplined courage, was falling apart in the face of an enemy that fought outside all known rules of warfare. "Sir," his tactical officer said, "the humans are broadcasting again." Captain Dan Murphy's voice filled the bridge once more. "Admiral Kexler, you now have 57 minutes to begin your withdrawal. We have 49 more kinetic projectiles positioned throughout Zephyrian space. Each one is targeted at a different world or installation." Kexler activated his reply channel. "Captain Murphy, if we withdraw from this system, what guarantee do we have that you won't attack our worlds anyway?" "Admiral, Earth doesn't want to conquer your empire. We just want you to stop attacking peaceful civilizations. Withdraw from all colony territory, and we'll consider this matter closed." "And if we refuse?" Murphy's reply was cold and final. "Then we'll demonstrate why human military planners spent 40 years preparing for wars of extinction." The threat hung in space between the two fleets. 1,500 Zephyrian ships faced 12 human vessels, but the numbers no longer mattered. The humans had weapons that could destroy entire worlds, and they had proven they were willing to use them. Ambassador Thelanara watched the confrontation from the surface of the Kelani homeworld. The alien diplomat had spent days trying to understand how 12 human ships could face such overwhelming odds with confidence. Now she was beginning to grasp the terrible truth about Earth's military philosophy. "Captain Murphy," she transmitted to the human flagship, "your species, how did you become so effective at warfare?" Murphy's reply was broadcast on open channels, ensuring that both Zephyrian and Kelani forces could hear it. "Ambassador, humans evolved on a world where survival meant constant conflict. We fought wars against nature, against animals, and against each other for thousands of years. We learned that the only way to guarantee peace was to become so dangerous that our enemies would choose negotiation over battle. But the cost... double quotes, Ambassador Thelanara said. "The cost of preparing for war is high," Murphy agreed. "But the cost of losing a war is extinction. We chose to be ready." Fleet Admiral Kexter listened to this exchange with growing understanding. The humans weren't just another spacefaring species. They were survivors of a world so hostile that they had developed warfare into a science of total destruction. "All ships," he finally ordered, "begin withdrawal from the Kalani system. We return to collective space immediately." The massive Zephyrian fleet began turning away from the battle, their perfect formations breaking apart as individual ships raced to escape the range of human weapons. It was the first retreat in collective military history, and word of it would spread throughout the galaxy within days. 3 months later, Admiral Lisa Hayes stood in the council chambers of the Galactic Federation, a loose alliance of peaceful species that had been powerless to stop Zephyrian expansion. The chamber was filled with representatives from dozens of different worlds, all of them staring at the human delegation with a mixture of gratitude and fear. "Ambassador Thelanara has proposed that Earth be invited to join the Federation," announced Council Speaker Veltar, a tall, graceful being from the Altarian system. "However, your species' military capabilities raise concerns among some members." Admiral Hayes looked around the chamber at faces both familiar and alien. "Speaker Veltar, Earth understands your concerns. Our military doctrine is based on principles that most galactic civilizations find disturbing." "Then why should we trust you?" asked Representative Mordek from the Centauri Alliance. "Because," Admiral Hayes replied, "our entire military philosophy is designed to prevent wars, not start them. We prepare for conflict so thoroughly that our potential enemies choose peace instead." She activated a holographic display showing human military bases throughout local space. "Earth has spent 40 years building the most advanced military force in this region of the galaxy, but we've never used it for conquest. We've only used it to protect peaceful civilizations like the Kalani." Council Speaker Veltar leaned forward. "What do you propose?" "The Terran Protection Accords," Admiral Hayes said. "Earth will serve as the military protector for any Federation member that requests our aid. In exchange, we ask for peaceful cooperation, technology sharing, and help in establishing diplomatic relations with other galactic civilizations." "And if we refuse," Admiral Hayes smiled, "then you refuse. Earth doesn't force anyone to accept our protection. But if you're ever threatened by aggressive empires like the Zephyrian Collective, we'll be available to help." The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some representatives argued that accepting human protection would make them dependent on Earth's military. Others pointed out that the alternative was continued vulnerability to aggressive neighbors. Finally, Ambassador Thelanara stood to address the chamber. "Fellow delegates, 3 months ago my world was facing extinction. The Zephyrian Collective was days away from completing their conquest of our system. Today, we are free because 12 human ships did what 300 Kalani vessels could not do." She paused, looking around the chamber. "The humans fight in ways we find disturbing, but they fight to protect civilizations like ours. I would rather live under the protection of dangerous friends than die at the hands of honorable enemies." The vote was closer than expected, but the Terran Protection Accords were approved. Earth officially became the military arm of the Galactic Federation, responsible for defending peaceful worlds against aggressive empires. 1 year later, Captain Dan Murphy, now promoted to Admiral, stood on the observation deck of Kalani Station, the first permanent human base outside the solar system. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see human and alien technicians working together on joint projects. Colonel Kate Williams joined him at the window. "Any regrets about how we handled the Zephyrians?" Murphy shook his head. "We gave them every chance to withdraw peacefully. When they chose to escalate, we ended the war quickly and decisively." "The galaxy still doesn't understand us," Williams observed. "They don't need to understand us," Murphy replied. "They just need to know that attacking peaceful civilizations means facing Earth's military. Word has spread to every corner of galactic space. Humans fight wars of extinction." Through the window, they watched a group of young human officers training alongside alien allies, teaching them basic military tactics while learning about galactic diplomacy. It was the beginning of a new era, one where peaceful civilizations could grow and prosper under the protection of a species that understood war so well they rarely had to fight. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the most peaceful societies were those protected by people who were very, very good at violence, and Earth intended to keep it that way.